I thought I'd bring a few stories that speak to the idea that just a slight change in perspective is often enough to change your entire world. So we'll begin with a story about forgiveness. There was a respected rabbi, very respected, who was traveling across the country to go visit his daughter and son-in-law in Vilna. The rabbi was sitting in his cabin, and at the same station, another young man came on. And this young man, from the look on his face, was already having a difficult day, to say the least. The train starts moving, and the rabbi lights up his cigarette. The young man has a scowl on his face, and he coughs and says, "Rabbi, put that thing out. Don't you know there are other people in this cabin with you?" And so the rabbi nods his head, apologizes, puts out his cigarette. A short time later, the rabbi opens up the window to the compartment to get a little fresh air in their stuffy cabinet. But of course, the young man, with another scowl on his face, looks at the rabbi, who he doesn't realize is a rabbi, and says, will you close that dang window? I'm going to catch a cold." The rabbi notices that the young man has a heavy coat on and is a little confused, but nevertheless, he seems to have offended the young man, and he apologizes. "Of course, I'll close the window." As you know, these train rides were not short affairs. So over the ensuing hours and hours that the rabbi and the young man were in the cabin together, the young man complained about this, and he complained about that. It seemed there was nothing in the world, nothing that the rabbi could do that the young man wouldn't complain about. Finally, the train pulls into the station in Vilna. The young man looks out the window and is incredibly surprised to find a massive crowd of Jews waiting at the station, at the platform. He notices that the man he's been sharing a cabin with gets up, puts on his coat, walks outside, and is immediately surrounded by hundreds of people clamoring for a word, a handshake, just a moment of this rabbi's time. So the young man, very confused, leans over to someone in the crowd and asks, "Who is this man? Why is everyone waiting for him?" The local man says, "Well, of course, this is Rabbi Israel Salanter, the great rabbi of the Musar movement, the man who believed that a life of mitzvot, a life of fulfilling mitzvot, can only matter if we are also living an incredibly ethical life." The young man realizes the error he's made. And the next day, he finds out where Rabbi Salanter is staying with his daughter and son-in-law. And he goes to the rabbi's door and he knocks, and the rabbi opens the door. And he says, "Oh, Rabbi Salanter, I am so deeply sorry. I am so deeply sorry for bothering you on the train. If I offended you in any way, you have my deepest apologies." Now, Rabbi Salanter, being the ethical man that he was, knew that if someone approaches you for forgiveness and the apology is sincere, then it's the other person's job to give forgiveness. And so Rabbi Salanter says, "Well, of course, I've forgiven you. I've forgiven you." And the young man turns around and starts to walk away, but Rabbi Salanter says, wait there just a minute. I'm curious, what brings you to Vilna in the first place?" The young man says, "Well, Rabbi Salanter, I wanted to make a living. I left my small village, so that I could come and be a shochet, right? A kosher butcher, a ritual slaughterer, which was a very prized possession in that day, or a very prized profession in that day. And so the rabbi looks at this young man and says, well, as luck would have it, my son-in-law is a shochet. My son-in-law is a kosher butcher. I'm sure that I can arrange some work with him. And so the next day, the rabbi brings the young man to his son-in-law's shop. But it's soon apparent that the young man doesn't have the knowledge, doesn't have the ability to perform the duties of a shochet. And so Rabbi Salenter says to the young man, as the young man is about to turn away and walk, wait just a minute. I know of a great teacher down the road. Let me pay for your lodgings in his home, and in no time at all you'll learn the ways of the shochet. And the young man is flattered and agrees. Soon enough, the young man has learned the trade of the shochet, and he gets a job just outside of Vilna. The day that the young man is set to leave for his new job, he once again approaches Rabbi Salenter. And Salenter says, what have you come for? I know you have a train to catch. You must be off. The young man has a confused look on his face. Rabbi, there's something that I've been pondering since I first came here. I had wronged you. I apologized and I was forgiven. That should have been the end of it, right? Why did you call me back? Why did you introduce me to your son-in-law? Why did you pay for my education? Why did you help me find a job? And Rabbi Salenter looks him in the eye and he says, you see, indeed, I had forgiven you, but here's the thing about human nature. When someone has wronged you, it's only natural, regardless of whether or not apology has been made, for there to still be a little residue of ill feeling towards that person that wronged you. It's inevitable. That's how we're built. And I also know that the only way to rid myself of that ill-feeling residue is to do good for the other person. You see, helping you helped me rid my heart of any residue of ill feelings. And so it is, and so it was, and so it will be. The end. So now we come to New York City. New York City, the city that never sleeps. I'm sure many of us have been there. And as you know, it's not exactly a quiet town, right? So this is a story. Two guys were walking down the street, and in their ears rang the sound of trucks and the cabs and the cabbies honking and people yelling and music playing from the bodega. People were talking on their cell phones. Advertisements were blaring over the loudspeakers. And as they're walking, one man turns to the other and he says, "Did you hear that?" His friend says, "What? I can't hear anything. It's so loud with the cabs and the trucks and the people talking on their cell phones." And the other young man says, "Well, I just heard a cricket." "How could you have heard that? How could you have heard that, cricket, with all the trucks and the cabs and the horns and the people talking into their cell phones?" "Well, I heard it just across the street. Come with me." So the two men cross the street, and sure enough, sitting on the ledge of a window is a cricket, chirping away. The one friend looks to the other who had heard the cricket and says, "What, are you a magician? How could you have heard that?" with all the trucks and the cabs and the horns and the people yelling and talking and the music from the bodegas blaring. How could you have heard that? It's unbelievable. So the friend who had heard the cricket, a smile comes to his face. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out a shiny quarter. "Watch this," he says. He drops the quarter on the sidewalk, and in a flash, the trucks stop, the cabs stop, the honking stops, the people stop talking, and they all focus on that quarter. And the wise young man turns to his friend and says, "See, it all depends on what you're listening for. It all depends on what you're listening for."
I like that.
I like that one too.
Yeah, because you hear what you want to hear.
Exactly, you hear what you want to hear. And so if we just tune our perspective slightly, it's amazing what we may be able to find or make real in this world. So here's another story about a rabbi and an older man who had never studied the Jewish texts, the rabbinic texts. The man comes to the great rabbi and he says, "Rabbi, all my life I've seen my neighbors, the great rabbis, the great thinkers gather in the house of study, and I've seen you debate and read and learn and grow. Is it possible that you could teach me to do that? Is it possible that you could teach me the Talmud?" Well, the rabbi strokes his beard, because I think all rabbis have beards. I don't have one yet because I haven't been ordained. Rabbi strokes his beard, and he says, "Well, you see, I'll test you, because it takes a certain kind of mind to approach the Talmud. Certain kind of mind. So let me ask you a few questions, and we'll see if you're ready to study Talmud." So the rabbi turns to the man and says, "Two men come down a chimney. One comes out clean, one comes out dirty. Which one washes himself?"
The clean one.
So, the man who wishes to study Talmud says, "Well, the dirty one, of course, right? The dirty one who comes out of the chimney is the one who washes himself." And the rabbi says, "Not so fast. You see, when the two people come down the chimney, the dirty man looks at the clean man and thinks to himself, 'I must be clean too.' The clean man looks at the dirty man and says, 'Oi, I must be dirty,' and he goes to wash. The man has a confused look on his face, so the rabbi says, 'Okay, another question. Two men come down a chimney, one comes out dirty, one comes out clean. Which one washes himself?' The man looks at the rabbi like he's crazy. Didn't you just ask me this question? It's the clean man, right? The clean man is the one that washes himself, because you said the clean man sees the dirty one, thinks he's clean, washes himself." And the rabbi says, "But you see, there was a mirror nearby. And if there's a mirror, the two men walk over to the mirror. The clean man sees that he is clean. The dirty man sees that he is not. And the dirty man washes himself." "Oi, is this what it is to study Talmud?" says the man. "I'm not sure if I can make sense of it." And the rabbi says, "Well, let me ask you one final question. Two men come down from a chimney, one comes out clean, one comes out dirty.
Cannot be.
Which one washes himself?" And the man says, "Well, you see, Rabbi, I'm really confused. The first time you told me it was the clean man who washes himself because he sees the dirty man, and then you told me that there was a mirror, and the dirty man sees himself in the mirror and he washes himself. And the rabbi says, yes. But what you should have answered is, how can two men come out of a chimney and one be clean and one be dirty? And that is what it is to study Talmud. Yes, it couldn't be. So, right, that teaches us how if we simply shift our perspective from trying to find the answer to trying to find the right question, that too can change everything. She asks if it was a similar idea to beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Yeah, it's a question of perspective, right? It's a question of who's looking and how they look that determines what is beautiful, right?
Right.
Absolutely. So I'll leave you with this final story. Many, many years ago, somewhere in Europe, you know, where most of these stories tend to take place, there was a great rabbi, the Baal Shem Tov. And whenever the Jewish people were threatened, the Baal Shem Tov would go out to a special place in the woods, and in a very special, particular way, he would light a fire. And after he had done that, he would utter a special blessing. And when he had done that, each and every time, the Jewish people would be preserved for another day, another week, another month. But, as is the nature of all people, eventually the Baal Shem Tov passed away. And his student was left in charge. Now, again, as has been the case century after century, the Jews were under attack yet again. The Baal Shem Tov's student said, yes, there was this special place that my rabbi, that the Baal Shem Tov used to go to, and he would light a special fire, and he would say a special blessing. But the problem is that the rabbi never told me where that special place in the forest was. So the student goes into his yard. He still remembers how to light the fire, the special fire that the Baal Shem Tov would light, and he still, of course, remembers the blessing that the Baal Shem Tov would utter. And even though he couldn't remember where in the forest he was meant to be, God heard his prayer, and the Jewish people were preserved for another day, another week, another month. Decades later, this student would pass away too, as is the fate of all of us. And his student would come to take over the school. As has been the case throughout our centuries, the Jewish people were again under attack. And the student of the Baal Shem Tov, well, he said, I remember there was this special thing that the Baal Shem Tov would do, and his student after him. All I have to do is, I have to go to this special place in the forest. I have to light the fire in a special way, and I have to say the special blessing. But he couldn't remember where in the forest he had to go. And he certainly couldn't remember how to construct the fire that he needed to construct. But he still knew that special blessing. And so the student of the Baal Shem Tov utters the blessing. God hears his prayer, and the Jewish people are again preserved for another day, week, month. Generations later, the great-great-great-grandchildren of the student of the Baal Shem Tov are in America. And yet again, the Jews have come under attack. He's been told this story over and over about how the Baal Shem Tov, whenever the Jews were in danger, he would go to a special place in the woods, and he would light a special fire in a very particular way, and he would then utter a special blessing. The great-great-great-grandchild of the student of the student of the student of the Baal Shem Tov didn't know where that forest was, and even if he did, he was an ocean away. He couldn't remember, didn't even know how to start to light the special fire in that very special way. And he didn't speak Hebrew, so he couldn't remember the blessing. But he remembered the story. And so he told this story to his children, and they to their children, and so on and so on. And despite the fact that they didn't know the place, nor the way, nor the blessing, God heard their prayer, and the story itself was enough, because it always was. The end. Thank you very much, everyone. This has been an absolute delight to be with you this semester telling stories. I, of course, will, strive to bring more into maybe Kabbalat Shabbat and our Shabbat morning services. But for now, this concludes our storytelling time. I hope that with hearing these stories, you realize that all it takes is just a slight shift in perspective.
All Jewish life and programming here at Cedar Village are due to the financial support of the Jewish Home of Cincinnati, so thank you.